So I'm a creative guy. I've always considered myself a creative guy. I don't know what that means, but I have to share with you guys what a time to be alive and be creative. Honestly, like I think there's so many things happening around us that just justify the fact that creativity is not only booming, but it's necessary, and it's probably the most important and single most powerful agent of change that we have in our hands today. And I consider myself very lucky because today we have a guest that is also an expert on the topic. It's a personal friend of mine. I have the privilege of knowing this guy for quite a while, and we have collaborated on so many projects. Daniel Osuna, a personal friend, and I invited him to join us today in the conversation because he's an expert in creative economies. And I was discussing with him the other day, and I said, Danny, you know, like he has his agency, he has so many cool projects. I have my project as well, and we were talking about the potential we have, all the things we can do, and at the same time, some things that need to happen in order for this creativity to reach its full potential and deliver the change that is expected out of us. So that's why I have Danny and my brother Mateus here today to have a conversation about this. So Danny, how are you, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Good having you, man.
Hey, Mateus.
It's a pleasure, man. So tell us a little bit, like introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you have been doing, and let's dig into this idea of how creativity is going to change the world, man.
All right. Well, a little background. I've been a formal creative for over 15 years. I have an agency. I started a production company. But the last 4 years, I've really sunk my teeth into the subject and started to wonder why there's so many weird and problematic negative things around creative when it's such a beautiful thing. When I create something, when I create a campaign, when I create a something digital, something that's new, it's probably like the best feeling I can ever have. Yep. But at the same time, I became disenamored with what we do as an industry because I started seeing that, you know, creatives, myself, have certain issues that just happen, and it just felt like the Wild West. Right. You know, so when you say that it's a great time to be a creative, it is a great time. Creative is, I think, one of the industries that has the most potential, but also it needs the most definitions. It needs the most structure and collective ethics because it does feel like the Wild West when you probably, if you're creative, you probably had a client that hired you and then said, I didn't like what I did, or my niece can do the same job, or literally just told you, hey, you can do my logo, yeah, but you have the honor of having me on your web page.
So I absolutely love that, and I think that's a great place to start, right? So we have this premise of saying, like, you know, creativity probably has the greatest potential of every human attribute or human capacity you can have today in order to really make it and stand out in the market. But at the same time, we also have a market that is under-regulated, that is very chaotic, there's high competition. But let's start from the very, very basic. Mateus, would you like to weigh in with an idea of creativity or a notion of creativity?
Yeah, so there's a nice anthropological view on creativity, which up until these recent years was quite negative. So the creative gene was not always something desired, because once you stand out from the herd, once you are like honestly different,
unique,
you start standing out. And for example, in the ancient civilizations, once you went out hunting, it was a matter of discipline, uniformity, and synchronicity, you know. So once you start doing things on your own, you kind of look like the rebel. You start standing out, and it's dangerous, actually.
To stand out is dangerous.
Yes, it's dangerous. I really think that today things are changing, but at that time, I mean, I'm talking about thousands of years ago. And the thing is that once you start doing things differently, you become kind of a target in some ways. So there's a lot of risk there. But I think today that's not even a choice. You have to stand out, you know.
That's true.
Because once you are part of the herd, we're so many people in this planet, and we have to innovate. And for me, the only way to stand out and to really make your own brand in the world, you have to be completely different. I mean, Steve Jobs proved that to us. I think that phrase echoes through everyone's, you know.
Yeah, well, basically, I concur totally with what you're saying. And I think that right now it's the first time we can actually call creative a full industry, or a very, very multifaceted industry. That is in real life, it's extremely powerful. In economic terms, it's between 10 and 17% of the GDP of countries. In developing countries, we're between 7 and 12%. So this is GDP. Right. So like there's a very, very famous saying that Tony Blair said that England makes more money from rock music than rock music than coal. So you see coal as this tangible good. Rock. It's secure, it's safe, it's something there. But rock is something that's out in there. It's something that is in
It's transcendent, man.
Exactly.
It's transcendent. People.
So right now, this value or this transference of value from physical goods to intellectual goods is a very real notion. But we have to understand it, and I like to kick it off by asking you, like, what do you define as creative? Because the word creative itself is just descriptive when it now is an industry. Yeah. So saying creative should be synonymous with medicine, right? With legal, with any formal industry that actually has that represents the economic power it has.
So then, sorry to interrupt you. We were talking before we started the shoot about some problems you recognize like instantly on the creative industry, like some, as you mentioned, some intangibles, and like how do you see like a solution to structure this whole industry?
It's a complicated thing, but I've been studying creative for a while. First, we divided into 9 areas. I'm not going to get too much into that. But the problems we saw consistently in all creative fields are ego, which basically is like the Achilles heel of creative, because it's an industry based on something that is untangibles in many cases. So basically, the ego or falls into certain groups that validate or invalidate things. What is beautiful, what is not. Yeah. So once you have something that is valuable, that is who determines that value, the creative value. So ego is very, very important. Then we have the ethics side. When we see other industries not understanding, or even the creatives themselves not understanding what they are as an industry or where they fit, you have a lack of communal ethics. Ethics are extremely important because, for example, if I would tell you, if a construction company has a fraud with another construction company, it becomes this whole deal because it's a standardized market. Right. But in creatives, if an agency steals from another agency, who determines that? Yeah. Who regulates it? And then we have the pricing issue. Pricing is extremely important since it's all subjective. People don't know what to charge. And they're like, hey, I made a design. What am I going to charge for it? I made a song. I made a poem. I wrote a screenplay. Yep. What am I going to charge for it? And then lastly, the probably one of the biggest hurdles is also competition. Understanding that in traditional capitalism, you would see many companies coming together, competing against each other and building better products. It's better for the consumers. Right. It's better for the pricings. It promotes innovation. But in creative, everybody wants to be the only guy. Mm-hmm. I want to be the only guy doing this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I would like to tap into a couple of things that you just said there that I think are really, really interesting. So connecting back to what we said at the beginning, like this almost optimistic thing to say, like, what a time to be alive if you're a creative guy. I think the biggest movement I see here is that globally what we're seeing, it's a movement from commodities to experiences, or from commodities to added value. Mm-hmm. And probably the idea of added value is the one that I most closely relate to creative economies, right? Because creative economies is about multiplying valuable value to intangible levels. We come from a society of hunters and gatherers, and of course commodities are like almost the definition of commodity is coal. You know, when you talk about oil or coal or orange juice or copper or gold, like these are apples, tangible things because you can measure them because you know how much they weigh, so you much what you can do with them, and there's a finite amount of possibilities of what to get out of that. But an idea, a concept, an idea and a concept are infinite in terms of application, in terms of the ability to make waves and waves of change that will trigger so much benefit for everyone. And in that sense, that's why I think it's so important for people to relate personally on a very personal level and say, man, if I have creative potential, if I'm a creative guy, I can make a ripple effect around the world to make a proper change. So just tapping on the four things that you said that I thought were really, really brilliant is saying that first, the ego. So it's kind of a dual point of view here, because first, of course, ego is going to be an issue when you speak about creativity, because creativity is about uniqueness. You know, we judge creative ideas by how single they are, by how much, like if I come up with something cool, I want it to be me. I want it to be related to me. Like if you come up with a cool idea, you want people to recognize that.
You want the credit.
You want people to recognize that that's your idea.
But of course. Let me get into a little bit of there. So there's this figure of the creative genius, being the loner that thinks about the idea, that writes it up, that comes it up by himself, and then brings it to the world. Oftentimes that's not the case how it is. So I think that creativity comes from harnessing the power of as many variables as you can, mixing them up and creating something unique, going back to that point. So I agree with the point that here comes the ego and you want to put your signature there. It's you that did it. But as you collaborate with more and more and more artists and designers and more architects and even economists and engineers,
lawyers,
you collect and you harness this intellectual wealth, and then you create something. So it's not, I kind of agree with you in the sense that it's your idea and it's your property, but I think that we should look for more and more collaborations, because that's what brings better and better. We need to bring more subjective points into the picture, not only individualistic points.
I think that controlling the ego in what we've been developing as creative philosophy is it falls on the passion side. So when you create something out of passion, the credit, I think, comes second. First is getting this done.
I agree.
And then once you get it done, establishing credit is okay. But when you mix it with the ability that I just want this done, and I believe that if I put this code out for this video game, somebody's going to make it better, you're believing in something bigger than yourself. And I think it falls on us as creatives to believe in something bigger, like an industry, that you can make yourself part of this industry. And if you are able to separate, or we're able to separate collectively from this ego, we can build and actually start formalizing this Wild West, and making it something where, I just want to live here. We all want to live here. We all want this. Like
we all have these aspirations.
In marketing, one of my mentors is a great marketing man, George Lewis. He you can see how he works with passion up to his late years. He literally creates with purpose, creates with passion. And what I see in his success is that right now he's available to work only in what he believes in. But when I looked into my clients, and I have in my agency some of the biggest clients in the marketing world, I'm not proud of it. I don't want to be doing exactly what I'm doing in 30 years. And I think it's this sense of community and transcendence of what I want to do that allows me to disconnect that ego.
So I think there's a big topic here that will take many hours for us to go in depth into it, of this idea of having the necessity to be unique, to create something unique, but separate that necessity from actually competition. Being able to be inclusive and work in collaborative environments and understand the value of individualism within a creative community. I think that's a great point. Also, but before the conversation, Daniela, I asked you if you could sum it up, like if you had like the top 5 things Do you have in mind the top 5 things? And if you do, tell us one of them, and let's dig into that.
I think the first one is something you just talked about, that it's the right time. We've never had a time in history and human evolution where we can be as efficiently as creatives as we have now. We can actually, it goes from before you actually produce something creative, you can learn online, you can learn from other people, you can look up information and how to do these curiosities that just pop into your head that make you multidisciplinarian. Then you have the production side. With less than $10,000 you can buy any computer, you can literally invest in your own company. Your leagues beyond making a business plan and looking for investment, and you create your own company by yourself. And then it comes the part of amplification and commercial. You can sell online to the world, and if you made something unique, as you mentioned uniqueness, you can find a client for that in Sweden, in Tokyo, in Mexico City, and you can have this product anywhere, and that allows you to understand that there's a big enough pie for everyone.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's super cool.
And
so
I think you're really tapping into something of the worldwide ethos right now. This is something extremely massive. I'm sure you guys remember from TED, the most viewed TED talk was Schools Kill Creativity, from Ken Robinson. Everyone has seen that.
It's an incredible
talk. And the guy, his story, right? Like, he had polio when he was like 5 or 6 years old, and he was literally paralyzed for most of his youth. Yeah. So he started like studying and getting into education, and he found his passion, and he calls it The Element. That's his first book. He says where your natural talents meet your interests, meet your deep personal interests. Exactly. And I think that's where something magical happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. And for me that story is so crazy. Like, I know so many people that have this same story. Like, it probably happens to you. Like, you feel you have this creative vocation, this creative calling, and at the same time you're interested by all these artists and creative power and music and arts and stuff like that, but you're frustrated because you feel almost obligated to work with something that don't give you the return you're expected.
I can relate to that.
That's why I really want to go back to that as much as possible. If you are a creative person, what a time to be alive, because really today is probably easier than ever before to make a living out of your creative potential doing what you love. And this was not true 10 years ago. And people can argue and say, man, come on, my parents, they had a huge house with a pool and whatever, and they were like school professors, or they work in a library. And today, in order to maintain a decent apartment, you need 2 jobs and prostitute yourself on the weekends. It's complicated. But in that sense, it's also true that if you have a creative potential and you find that element, you find that calling, the tools for amplification are there.
Exactly.
What we need is organization. We need focus. We need to create these creative communities. We need opinion leaders like yourself in order to guide and provide the right path. Because the first guy to walk the path is going to be the hardest one, right? Yeah. But then a lot of people can follow through. And like you said, we need to stop to be afraid of competition, because today the world is our market, and the world is the biggest pie for everyone to share.
Yes,
if you have talent and if you have something of value, even if it's your capacity, it's your ability. There's a market for that.
Exactly. No, and you touch on something very, very, very delicate, which I believe is one of the most important things, is this frustration. And it leads to, we've had epic levels right now of mental health problems and anxiety and these issues that young people are having because they feel totally disconnected. The way they're being taught, that what their parents are asking them to do, and what they believe they can accomplish. Right. So you have this disparity between what you believe you can accomplish, and you know that the tools are out there to be more, but you don't know how. So that's why it really became a personal passion for me to actually try to join with minds as yourself and other great thinkers and just say, how do we solve this? How do we lay the basis? And if somebody comes later and then redefines what I did, great. But that is the mentality. It's not about being the only one. It's about understanding that there is something out there that we want to achieve. And I think the only solution is communal, is together.
Right. So what do you think are some of the barriers that we have right now, and how can we, let's see how we can overcome those? Like, what are the biggest things stopping us from getting there?
The biggest fear is huge.
Right.
You know, if this fear, we have intrinsic problems and extrinsic problems. You know, intrinsic are ours. And one of them is fear. You know, is like, I fear I don't have the same stability as my parents. I fear I won't be able to accomplish this. I fear I won't be able to pay for this school that just doesn't make sense economically,
right.
Because literally I can design when I'm 12.
Yeah.
And why am I going to go to university for
and
this?
how am I going to pay for a master's degree?
Why am I going to pay? And why am I going to pay for it?
You're right.
So I think it was Warren Buffett that said that if your next direct job is not relevant, a master's degree is not relevant to it, you don't need it.
I agree.
That it's very simple, and education needs to evolve greatly. But I think education, fear, and basically how the industry is viewed are the biggest hurdles, like in terms of
cool.
macro way.
I think one of the things that you said, and that we have a real story here to tell, is about this idea of fear. You know, like how people commit and find their elements and commit to a passion and do something that they love. And you also said, like, how do you choose when to start a master degree or choose a school or a professionalization? And it's so hard to justify. You know, you're like, so many people are so afraid to do this. And I think, like, Mateus, you just came back, and Mateus is a super creative guy, and he's working with applied philosophy.
Yeah,
and you just
so
came back from your master degree in London. So tell us, where did you got the balls to suddenly drop
here
your
we go,
life
man. Yeah,
and
guys,
make it 100-degree and 180-degree turn?
There's a word that has been going on in my mind while you were talking right now, and the word is volition. Okay, so volition is your capacity to make your desire into your will, into actual work. Okay, and that's one of the greatest barriers, I think. Well, I mean, one of the greatest for creative people, to get in there, put your hands in the activity and do it. So I studied engineering, okay, here in Mexico, and I quickly got into sales, corporate sales, business to business.
The shed ladder.
I don't want to get into a lot of details on that, but
door to door.
You guys know me. You guys know me. I've always had a passion for creativity, for different, many interests.
Concepts.
I have a wild imagination, a lot of curiosity, many things. So that's why I found a creative outlet in music. So I became a DJ, and then I found another creative outlet in philosophy. So I started reading philosophy.
Right.
But then I got to a point where I was in Sao Paulo working for a massive company, and I said, like, okay, so in my free time, what am I doing? I'm reading Plato and I'm playing Eric Prydz, and I love this. How the hell can I join my passions with what I do with my living? I'm wasting my time. It was a very, very scary thing at the time.
Yeah.
Looking back, it was completely devastating. Yeah. And as an engineer, I structured a massive plan. You know, like I said, like, okay, I have to take this seriously. Like this is my life. There's nothing else. So I'm gonna save up some money. I'm gonna talk to my friends, to my family. I created like a little diagram for myself, like 10 Skype calls, starting from the easiest to the hardest talks, you know. Yeah. And I started talking to people, and I was actually pitching them.
I was number one.
You were number 2. Mom was number 1. But actually, the hardest talk was with you, man, because Mom said, like, Mateus, just do it. Your mom, I mean, I'm crazy as you are. Just go, man. Just fucking go. It's like, you know. But the one that inspired me really was this. He's not a philosopher. He did his PhD on the history of ideas. His name is Alain de Botton. He is kind of the outcast of the philosophers, the academic philosophers, because he said, like, listen, we have this wealth of knowledge. How can we use this for whatever, for XYZ? So he said, I'm going to use philosophy for education. So he came up with the idea of the school of life. Okay, this was, dude, I'm talking about 15 years ago. And in a way,
in philosophy years, there's like a month ago.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's like 2 days ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's 2 massive new fields in philosophy, which is applied philosophy, is what I did my master's in, and experimental philosophy, which is kind of statistic science using philosophical arguments. And their logo is like an armchair burning, because like the armchair philosopher is like the classic, right. You know, the guy just thinking by himself. Experimental philosophy is going out into the world. So how did I got? I mean, in some ways, like, I see that I didn't have a choice, man. I didn't have a choice. It was a point in my life I said, like, I either do this or I'm going to be miserable for the next 4 years.
So in that thing, I think you two have something in common. Like I've been working with Daniel for a while, and I think you have guts, man. Like in a very nice way. But
Volition,
like,
volition.
No, you have volition. That's a proper word for balls, let's say, right?
Yeah.
No, but you have guts in the sense like I've seen you put your money where your mouth is, literally.
Yeah.
Like, but like in a crazy
literally?
way. Like no, yeah. Literally. No, like literally, yeah. Like it's no, but it's crazy.
Right.
It's crazy. Like you even borrow money to be able to put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly.
And like.
Yeah.
If you can tell people, like, what do you need to get up in the morning and transform desire into will?
Yes.
Like, what was it that clicked for you?
For me, basically, it's that life, it's kind of bleak, but life really doesn't have a purpose if you're not happy.
Yeah.
So when I started, I have a very good relationship sometimes in like big companies with like CEOs and presidents, but with like a manager, I might have a lot of discrepancies because a manager sometimes is just, protecting his job.
Yeah.
And I like to say, okay, so we have a budget to do, we have, I don't know, $500,000 to do an event. Okay. So why don't we invent something in this event? Why don't we make it something weird? Why don't we devise a way that all people, I don't know, float?
Right.
And I'll come up with the engineering.
I'll figure it
I'll
out.
invest part of what I'm earning into this.
Cool.
And I'll just do a satellite company that's just going to make people float.
Right.
This is not true, but just an example.
Maybe true.
But
It could be.
It could be true.
The program is not over yet.
Hashtag
but-
artificial intelligence and
But I just
Virtual reality.
found it more fun than just going to the client and saying, hey, we're gonna put some wallpaper, we're gonna put some furniture, and we're gonna have some hors d'oeuvres, okay? And we're gonna have some entertainment. And I think that's the huge difference between a creative entrepreneur, somebody that actually lives, feeds off this passion for creation, and a person that just wants to make money. There's a lot of marketing people that are just in it for the money. And when you're in it for the money, you're going to get the same things over and over and the models that work. So and when you're talking about music, marketing, writing, production, content, TV, the people that break the molds are the people that are actually passionate about this. And a lot of them are going to fail.
Right.
And a lot of them are going to burn and fail. But I'd rather be in debt with this stress, like, dude, I just put all my money into just reinventing events.
Yeah.
But be happy about that.
And I think there's a super cool learning about both stories, and I'll try to summarize it. But I was just listening to you guys, and I think it inspired me to say that I hear a lot of people say that they're like, I'm not a big risk taker. So I'm stuck in this dead end job doing nothing. Like I have this friend, and we all have this friend, right?
Yeah, of course.
We have this friend that is like, man, like you're crazy. You take so many risks.
I've been that friend.
Yeah, you've been that friend. So and people are like, man, like you're stuck. You're stuck in
not
that
a
job.
dead end job.
You're crazy. You left your job. You had a super high pay. You were doing super well in a company.
Yeah.
I used to be a corporate douchebag as well. I wear in a power suit for a while, but people were saying like, man, you're crazy. You take risks. And like, no, you're the one taking risks. You're sitting on your ass and you're watching your life go by.
Your wife go by.
Yeah, your wife going away. Yeah, exactly. And you're calling me a risk taker?
Yeah.
Like, how do you live with yourself? Like, how do you go to bed at night, wake up in the morning, and do the same thing for 20 years, and you think other people are risk takers?
Of course,
like,
man.
People are blind if they don't see that the biggest risk they're taking in their lives is not getting out of their comfort zone, not striving for true happiness, not finding their element, and I think your stories are very much in common in that sense. So do you think a core part or a core competency of future creative communities are risk takers?
Yes, but the risk takers are going to be the guys that build the way.
Right.
I believe that creative has this possibility to produce people that feel a little bit more comfortable in a more known path. but understanding the path, that there's a path, because right now there is no path. It's a wild west. So you have to be super risk taker. It's like when cinema started, when Hollywood started, it started with these guys that literally ran to California away from New York, because that's where the patents for the movie making machines were. So and
Tommy Wiseau and stuff.
Exactly, Tommy Wiseau. Yeah. So they ran to Hollywood as like kind of fugitives, and it was California because it was the closest place that they could go to Mexico if they found out the law was going to get them. But that's how the movie industry started in the States, with huge risk. But then you had, for example, the movie industry in Mexico. For example, the Lumiere brothers were in Mexico before the U.S. They had the president of Mexico at the time had them. Mexico was very wealthy at the time. But since it was comfortable, it was established in a way as portraying art. Yep. So it didn't become a business. It didn't become risk. It became, and that's the weird thing with art, because it's beautiful. We all love the word art. But I think we have to understand that even art, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you must become a creative entrepreneur, focused on art. Right. So it's not about just communicating something beautiful. It's about understanding you have a product, that you have a market, that you have a distribution channel. You have to understand all these things.
That's true. So I wanna kind of wrap it up. Like cool. I think we could go on for hours on this, and I hope sure, man. I hope we will. I hope we have a second opportunity to continue on the topic. But if you had like any closing statements, any inspiring things that you want to say to people that are struggling out there, like you watching this video, you have the creative potential. What do they do, man?
I think inspiration is key, but knowing from who to get inspired and why is very important. So I see a lot of inspiration sources out there that many people say, like, oh, why do you love the Kardashians? Why do people love the Kardashians and see them as very vacuous? I see that, but I also respect them in a way that they understood that there's a market. Entertainment is a market. It's a product. They became products. So it just feels when you're very elevated weird to talk about the Kardashians. But I believe that that's actually what you have to take from them. That they can be nothing, have no like real
value.
They have a lot of value, but not real like content talents. But they understood how to become products. So the key to all creative is make a product, understand that there's a market, focus on developing that product, and if other people are doing products, feed off them, share, and give this information without ego, in a sense that in one day it's going to return to you and your products are going to be better.
So then just before we started recording, and I was talking to you, and I was so excited about this idea of what a time to be alive if you're a creative person, like the potential that we have. And you told me this story, man, when you were talking about tetrasy. Like, go ahead.
Well, tetrasy is it's a term I coined. Basically, it's a kind of a geeky term. It means C to the fourth power, tetra C. So it's communities of collective creative cognition. So basically, it sounds very complicated, but what it means is of making communities or creative communities that are from its base inclined to share, to build off each other, and these communities should be created locally. They should grow, and in turn these will develop into real economies and to regional economies. And one great story that we have, and it's a real story, is that we have this board member in our non-profit that he developed. He had a beer. And this beer, he started creating a lot of waves with this beer. He made another beer, and then another person made another beer, and locally beer manufacturing started to increase. But they started competing against each other negatively when they started to turn back and say, who is my real enemy? You know, they started to understand that they were not enemies amongst themselves. Yes, the final consumer is going to choose one beer over another, but they started understanding that the enemy was the pricing of the grain, was the taxes that were being imposed on them, was the high cost of getting liquor licenses in the municipality. And these guys got together, made an association, and 4 years later, they actually have one of the best industries for artisanal beer in the country.
Nice.
They're the first municipality to actually achieve a 2-day around $400 liquor permit, and which allows any restaurant owner that wants to sell beer to literally go to the municipality, get their permit to sell artisanal beer. And it's developed the economy, it's developed providers, grain providers, agriculture. So, you know, that's the beauty. When you start building these healthy communities that are based on creative and sharing and understanding the problems, you understand that there's a bigger ring, an outer ring that starts developing of other economies, of other jobs, and it just becomes a place where people will be happy doing what they love.
That's cool. So thank you so much, man, for coming.
Thank you,
so
Danny.
much for the conversation. I hope we can really
It's great,
go on
man.
with this again.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
See you.